Ray Bowyer is a former commercial pilot who had a famous UFO encounter in 2007 near Alderney in the Channel Islands. The UFOs, which each could have been up to a mile wide, were witnessed by multiple people and were caught on radar. Ray's experience was detailed in his own words in Leslie Kean's book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots and Government Officials Go on the Record. In this interview, we discuss Ray's UAP encounter in depth. Please see the description for relevant links and other interviews that you might enjoy. So Ray, to start us off, can you please talk a little bit about your background and about your thoughts on the UFO phenomenon prior to your 2007 encounter?
Okay, my background, I was raised in a place called Shoreham by Sea in Sussex. I was born in the late 1950s, and I suppose I went through the standard educational system. I went into engineering to the University of Sussex in 1974, and I was there for 3 years, and then moved on to another engineering company known as Ricardo and Company, 1927 Limited, researching into diesel and petrol engines. And from there on, not long after, I started my flying training to become a commercial airline pilot. But the engineering background came in very useful in the flying game. And I did an approved course at CAA, Civil Aviation Authority approved course at a place called Goodwood in Sussex, which you've probably heard of. And it should have taken 3 years to do that, but we managed to compress it into 19 months. And from there on, I went into the airline industry. My first employer was a company called Novair, which used to be Calair before that, and before that was Caledonian, and before that it was Laker. So DC-10s and 737 airline. And unfortunately, that year of the recession hit really hard, and I was there for about 6 months and got laid off for the first time in 10 times. And over the years, I flew for I think Arini, where I saw the UFO encounter. I think that was my 13th airline in a very short period of time, and I stayed with Arini for 10 years.
Yeah. So when did you started with Arini in 1999?
That's right. Yeah, 1999. Got into Alderney in January of that year.
Yeah.
Arini were just starting to fly the Saab 340s, which was an awful aeroplane, and all the training take-up time wasn't available for me. You had to do a particular amount of flying with a co-pilot and that sort of thing. So I sat and twiddled my thumbs in Alderney for 2 months, and that was quite fun because the pubs are quite good.
And with Arini, if I'm pronouncing it right, you were spending all of your time essentially flying around France, the UK, and the Channel Islands, or
yes.
were they don't go further afield?
Occasional charters for mail at night into Bristol. I think I did the last Trilanda flight into Gatwick Airport in 2000. That was a medical evacuation, and there must have been a couple of hundred people surrounding the aircraft in Gatwick, because they used to, 7.4s and 7.3s and everything else. But this little tiny 18-seater was stuck in the middle of the airport with 200 people taking photographs of it. So it's quite an unusual thing in those days to see a Trilanda in a big airport.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, prior to 2007, what were your thoughts on UFOs, UAP? Had you had you considered the phenomenon? Did you have any interest in it as a child or as an adult prior to 2007?
Well, I think generally speaking, as a child, you watched programs like Star Trek and all the plethora of other TV programs that were around at the time. And I think my interest in it was fairly conclusively that there was something else apart from us, even as a young boy. I remember talking to people about, I was 10 years old or something in the 60s, sort of saying, what's going on in the world? Why are we the only people here? So the general background for me was simply the fact that I thought there was something else out there, but nothing more than that, really. Then the moon landings appeared, or did they? If you know what I mean. Did that happen? I don't know. But then that kind of raised another serious interest in space flight and that sort of thing, and aircraft. My father was in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War, and I liked aircraft, and that's why I decided to get into flying.
Yeah.
But I suppose my general feeling about UFOs or unidentified flying objects, or whatever you want to call them, it was general. And I think until I saw my first one, which was going towards Southampton, I don't think I've spoken to anyone else about this. Maybe I have. But I was flying from Alderney to Southampton in 2000, I think it was 2000, 2001, can't really remember, and at 5,000 feet. And I saw this very sparkly tube in front of me, dead ahead, 12 o'clock. I couldn't tell the range, but it looked, because the clouds are going behind it, and then the clouds are going in front of this tubular object, very bright, slight angle, maybe 30 degrees. It looked like a tube and sparkling very, very brightly. And I got towards it, and I looked through the binoculars at it, which I always carry, and I could see this sort of, I think it was rotating kind of slowly, about a 30-degree angle. And then I got closer to it, and I noted that beneath it was a British warship, a frigate. And I didn't take the number. I know maybe a 42 springs to mind, but underneath it there was a frigate, and then stationary. It wasn't underway. And I thought, that's odd. That's there. I've never seen a frigate in this situation before. It's about 2 miles south of the Needles. And then this sparkling object up above it. And I was getting closer, and I was about to call it in to Southampton air traffic control, because it was immediately in front of me and it wouldn't have been in the way. I had to go around it. And then the cloud went in front of it, and it just wasn't there anymore. It just disappeared. So I didn't call it in. That's my first experience with seeing a UFO. So I'm not a virgin when it comes to UFO sightings, if you know what I mean. So that's the first one I saw, and I've only had two. So
right, okay. Because I was going to ask, if you saw anything, prior to 2007, and so you've just answered whether you've seen anything since as well. So that's it.
That's it.
Two sightings ever. I mean, it's two more than me. So I mean, in terms of really conclusive sightings, really interesting sightings.
Well, I have had another one since that on the ground, but in Alderney. But perhaps we'll talk about that a little later on.
Yeah, exactly. We'll circle back to that. But so in 2000, you had, you were going similar direction and everything like that as well.
Same route, different altitude, because I was going to Southampton, so that means 5,000 feet. Odd flat evens, odd different, whichever direction you're going, and you fly at a different flight level. And in case anyone's going in the opposite direction, they're going to miss you by being outside of that certain altitude. So 5,000 feet as opposed to 4,000 feet, which was what I was flying at on the way back to Alderney with the second sighting in 2007.
Yeah. And did you feel like, again, we're going to get into the second sighting obviously in detail in a minute, but did you feel like the object was similar in the first sighting and the second sighting? The shape? Was it similar?
Totally different. Absolutely different. Smaller, I would say. Once again, I couldn't see any shadow on the sea because the clouds were disturbing. When you get a shadow on the sea of an object in the air, you can tell the size of it on the ground. It's very difficult to determine the size of an object when it's actually airborne. I'll get into that a little later on as well. But I couldn't determine the size. However, interesting, that evening, I phoned my mother up in England, in Brighton, in Hove, actually, where she was living, and I told her about this sighting, this sparkly tube thing that I'd seen just south of the Needles on the Isle of Wight. And I went to see her on the following week. I think it was a Tuesday. I went to see her on the Friday, and as soon as I walked in, she gave me the local newspaper, which is called the Evening Argus in Brighton. And she said, "Is this what you saw?" So I looked at this photograph in the newspaper, and it was identical. Really? And it was taken by the Brighton police helicopter in black and white, in colour, and they also filmed it, and it's still online now. You can still find it.
Oh, really?
And the only reason this chap, the helicopter pilot, published this was because he was retiring the next day, and he was out, so he didn't want to get the backlash of still being in the service when he filmed that. Yeah, so it is still in line now. I saw it a couple of years ago, and it is exactly what I saw. And there's a film of it overhead of Brighton, and the Palace Pier, or the Brighton Pier, whatever it's called now, is behind it. So it gives you some idea of scale. And it wasn't that big, probably I guess 50 to 100 feet long, and probably a diameter of around about 15 feet, something like that. So still pretty hefty. You know,
Yeah.
you wouldn't put it on your foot, but it's not nothing in comparison to the main sighting that I saw in 2007.
Yeah. Yeah, so about that frigate that was underneath it, are you aware? Like, I don't really know anything about the British Navy, the Royal Navy, or anything. Was that a frigate something that would have any kind of nuclear capabilities or anything like that on board?
Don't think then. We're going back to 23 years ago now, thereabouts. That wouldn't have had any nuclear. That would have been all missiles. No,
Hmm.
there wouldn't have been air to surface, air to air missiles on that. But why it was there, and there was no tether, if you know what I mean by that. There's no rope or cable going to the ship. There was nothing in the way,
Hmm.
but it was pretty quick. It was only there for about a minute when I saw all that going on. So that was pretty quick, and I only managed to get the frigate on the side of the ship before I went over the top of it, and I couldn't see the rest of the numbers. I was quite busy looking at this circular tube
Yeah.
that was spinning at 30-degree angles in front of my face. So yeah, that was pretty impressive.
How far away from you did you say you think it was,
I think
the
it
tube?
was because the clouds were. It's very difficult to determine how big a cloud is when you're flying. You can't
Yeah.
necessarily tell, but there were clouds in front, clouds going behind, and I reckon I was up to about a mile from it. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting to wonder, was the frigate there like checking out this UAP UFO activity, or was the UFO
yeah.
checking out the frigate?
Oh, yeah. Or was the frigate in control of the UFO?
Yeah, or
That's
that,
my
yeah.
thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Is that what you kind of speculate that
That
possibly the frigate was, yeah, in some way controlling
it,
the
yeah,
object?
it could just be coincidental that that frigate was anchored there for some reason. I've never seen one there before or since. So put it
Yeah,
that way. And I
yeah,
don't believe in coincidences.
yeah. It is really interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move on to your next encounter, the one that's been very publicized. It's you said the one in 2000. You haven't talked about it before publicly.
I think I've spoken about it to one or two other people, but I don't think it's ever been published.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
presume you're going to do that, and I'm very happy for you to do that.
yeah.
Yeah,
But this one, the 2007 one, obviously has been published across the world, around the whole world,
oh
and
yeah,
hit the
and back
media in
again.
a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
basically it was just a normal day. I'd been doing this route for at that time about 8 years. The
Mhm.
route that I would fly the Trilander would be. I was actually based in Guernsey at that point. I wasn't based in Alderney, and I'd be going from Guernsey to Jersey regularly, Jersey to Dinar not quite so regularly, and then Guernsey to Alderney, and then on to Southampton. And it was one of those days. So I come up from Guernsey to Alderney and landed and had a cup of tea or whatever, and then the passengers were loaded on and off. We went to Southampton for I don't know how many thousands of times I've done that route, but it was just a standard day. So it was a nice day, high cloud, a bit of overcast at around 10,000 feet. So there's no direct sunlight.
Mhm.
And I think I had 9 passengers going to Southampton, and it's just a normal flight, pretty calm. Landed in Southampton and discharged the passengers. And at that point, we weren't going inside to get the paperwork to get the load sheets. The load sheet was brought out, and pretty much within. I didn't take any fuel. I think, and the passengers were brought out, and off we went. So it was a southerly departure from memory on from Southampton, which is a north-south runway, and climbing through about 2,000 feet. We transferred to Southampton approach, and then pretty much straight and level in the cruise, almost directly to Alderney. We transferred to London TMA, um, London Air Traffic Control, if you like,
Mhm.
and stayed with them until about getting just across the Isle of Wight, which is around uh, about 15 miles south of Southampton Airport. So we're in the cruise now, 4,000 feet, had about 10 passengers in the back. And just as I went across to London, from London rather, to Jersey Control, which was getting into their area, I noticed that there was quite a bright light, somewhat similar to the one that we've just been discussing, the tubular UFO. There's another light very similar, but I didn't associate it as being anything more than a reflection from a greenhouse, probably in Guernsey. The greenhouses that they called vineries, and they grew thousands of tons of tomatoes back in the day. And of course, the light would shine from the sun and cause. You see it in cars, and you see it in houses, and all sort of thing. But the light was reflecting what I thought was off the roof of the glass roof of a vinery, and sort of didn't take any notice of it because they disappear. The angle between the sun, the vinery, and the aircraft changes. Mm-hmm. So I didn't take any more notice of it. And then another few seconds later, I looked again, and it was still there. I thought, that'll disappear in a minute, and it didn't. It just stayed in exactly the same spot as it was. So I thought, well, wait a minute, let's have a little look at this. So once again, my trusty binoculars, after 6 or 7 years, came out of the bag, and I had a look at it, and I thought, this has got a definite shape to it. It's not just a flash of a greenhouse roof. It's got a physical shape. Mm. So I waited and had another look at it, and got a bit closer to it. It's not getting much bigger. So it's not very big, or it's either not very big or it's a long way away. So eventually, getting closer and closer to it. It's getting a little bit bigger. I didn't need binoculars for much longer. My eyesight's pretty good. So I called it in to Jersey, and the controller there, I said, it's A-line 543, I can't remember the flight number now. I've got an object, my 12 o'clock dead ahead. Can you have a look on radar, please? To paraphrase, I've got all the audio recordings.
You've got them?
Yeah, and it lasts about 15 minutes, the whole encounter. And he said nothing on radar. So, all right. So it's me probably misconstruing what I'm looking at. All right, and I'm getting closer. Another minute or two goes by. I'm having another look through the binoculars, and the chap sat behind me, because this is an open cockpit aircraft. I can see from my flying positions right away to the back row, which is 18 passengers when it's full up. It's an open cockpit, and a chap sat behind me, and I said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Well, you have a look." And he had a look through the binoculars at this, what was becoming clear that was a physical object in the air. He said, "Wow, what is it?" I said, "Well, I'm not exactly sure." So he seemed a bit shocked at that, thinking that I should know exactly what it was. But of course I didn't. I had no idea. I'd never seen anything like it before. So we're getting closer now. That's 5 minutes gone by. And then the people sat behind this fellow in row 3, if you like, of 9. They could see what was going on. But the airplane flies slightly nose up. So people further back than that wouldn't be able to see what was ahead. But they could. Kate and John Russell, they saw, and I knew them quite well, and they saw what was going on. Now, John was colourblind, and Kate could see perfectly well. And he said, "What's that orange object ahead?" He thought it was orange, but he's colourblind. So, but it was really brilliantly sparkling, almost unbearable to look at. It was so bright, it was ridiculous. I've never seen anything as bright. It was brilliantly bright, but it didn't affect your eyes like the sun does when you look away. Very, very colourful. But we're getting closer to it now. So 6-7 minutes. And I've spoke to the chap in Jersey air traffic. I said, "Look, if there's definitely something still here." So he said, "Okay, I'm going to remove the filters and this sort of thing." And he said, "I've got some anaprop at your 10 o'clock high access anappropriation, which is an anomaly that you get through radar." And I said, "No, it's not that. I am looking." And they said to me, "How far away do you think it is?" And I said, "Well, it's probably around 7 miles from what I'm looking at." What I didn't know was when I first saw it, it was over 50 miles away. Now that's unusual. Now I've done a lot of night flying, freighting and all sorts of stuff at night. And you can see, for example, I used to do a flight from Gatwick up to Edinburgh. And you could see the city on a clear night from 50, 60 miles away. You just see a glow of lights. And it looked just like that. It looked in a very similar, different color, because the lights in cities tend to be yellow and orange because of the sodium lamps. But this was a different thing. But I didn't realize that it was over 50 miles away when I first saw it. So that's the intensity of the light. And also it showed some idea of the size of it, because it was a physical, you could see the shape, this 15:1 aspect ratio, sharp at the ends, 15 times higher in the middle, and this dark band on the side of it, what appeared to be the side. I don't know if it was oval, round, flat. I haven't got a clue, because there was no sunshine shining on the actual object. But I could get, if the shadow was on the sea, I'd be able to determine roughly the size of it. But there was no sun above. And I was thinking, if there was no sun above because it was completely overcast, high level, how could it be reflecting off a greenhouse roof? Because there was no sun shining in Guernsey. So it's all kind of coming into my head now. And I'm thinking this is definitely something in the way, because it was, once again, it was dead ahead, or it appeared to be. But I didn't realize that we weren't 7 miles away from it. We were still around 40 miles away. So this thing's big. I'm calling it in to this air traffic bloke. And the chap in Jersey said, okay, I've taken the filters off now. You've got a bit of an appropriation on your upper left, but I do have a contact on your slightly to your right, at so many, I think it's 40 miles away. I said, well, it can't be that. It's too far. I didn't say that, but it was just too far away. But it was. That was the first object that I saw. So we're continuing along. This is about 6 or 7 minutes into the first point of sighting, and it's getting bigger. So once again, binoculars went away, and I'm talking to air traffic, and the chap in air traffic in Jersey is asking a 146 jet flyby, I think, from Guernsey, to see if they could see anything from above, and I think it was below their nose, so they couldn't see over the nose of their aircraft to see what was basically literally underneath them. So they didn't have any contact, and they put out a general call in the area, and the Blue Islands Jetstream 32 coming in from the Isle of Man south towards Jersey, he called in and he said, I've got a contact. I may have got the timeline slightly wrong here, but it wasn't far off. He's looking over his left shoulder, as the captain of the aircraft, in his 7 o'clock, so it's really looking right behind. He had the contact. He could see the first object that I saw, which then was between Guernsey and Alderney and going quite close towards Casquet's Rock. And so I didn't know that. That was on a different frequency. I didn't hear that until that was on a Jersey approach. I'm still with Jersey Main, and we're going, still flying at 4,000 feet. Now, there's no point in using binoculars anymore, because this thing was just there. It was right there. And how big was it? I've always said it's been about a mile long. And really, looking at the radar traces that I've still got, that was printed out at the time, it does appear to agree with that. But perhaps we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm getting close, and it is actually about 10 miles north of Alderney now, where it's time for me to descend. Less than 500 feet a minute, stop people's ears hurting. It's an unpressurized aeroplane. So I'm starting to go down and approaching it, getting closer and closer to this thing. And I realize it's slightly off to my right now, as I maintain the same, is it? I can't remember I think it's 238 degrees. I'm coming down. We're getting towards 2,000 feet, and that is the beginning of the top of the haze layer. Haze layer exists when you get a different density of or different conditions, maybe salt in the atmosphere, and it's very difficult to see through a haze layer. It's easy to see up from underneath the haze layer, and it's easy to see from above the haze layer. But as I went through the haze layer, this thing started to get less and less visible. And I estimate that I was about 8 miles away from it when I last saw it, and descended into Alderney. Then looking up through the haze layer again, through this fairly thick piece of atmosphere, I couldn't see it anymore. And I made a normal approach and landed in Alderney, thinking, what on earth was that, sort of thing.
Yeah. Wow.
That was the first part of it. And when we landed, I taxied in, and said to any of the passengers if they think they've seen anything unusual during this flight without trying to lead anybody, would you like to go inside and perhaps report it to the desk? And see what, if you want to do that, you're very welcome. The chap I gave the binoculars to didn't do that. I think he was on a bit of a clandestine visit, to be honest. And whatever he was doing, he never appeared again. But the two sat in row 3, they did report it, and that's been widely publicised as well. It's pretty much exactly what I saw, and except for John, who's colourblind, he got a different colour. That's the way it is. So I landed, and the people went off, and I went in, and I thought, right, I got to make a report here. This has to be done. It's in Class-A Controlled Airspace. That airspace definition has changed now. It's not Class A, it's Class G these days. But Class A is the same as Heathrow, Gatwick, and the only other place in the UK was the Channel Islands. So it's the most highly surveilled airspace in British airspace. Mm-hmm. And so I've got to make a report. That's what you've got to do. If there's something in controlled airspace that shouldn't be there. There's one thing I forgot to mention. On the way down into Alderney, I spotted a second object, exactly the same shape, but a lot further away. That was down towards Guernsey, which was another 20 miles away. Yeah. But it was exactly the same shape, the same sparkly, sort of brilliant white. And both of these objects had this lateral bar. They appeared perfectly horizontal, but 2/3 of the way back, there was this dark bar, and there was an interface between the dark bar and the main body of the craft. It was sparkling, just like the one I saw over the Isle of Wight. It was sparkling in this little small area between the brilliance and the darker area, and both of them were exactly the same. Now I estimated they were about 20 miles apart, and looking at the radar information, they were a lot closer than that when they first suddenly appeared at the same second and disappeared at the same second, and they were moving away from each other at around about 12 knots. So having landed in Alderney, I went inside and I made a report, which went to the Royal Air Force or Ministry of Defence, and also to Jersey Air Traffic Control, and they sent a copy to the Ministry of Defence as well. And then I was scheduled to do the next flight, which is back to Southampton, exactly the same route, with the next set of passengers. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute. The last time I saw this huge piece of kit was exactly where I'm going to be taking off into the haze layer, which I can't see through. It's going to be an interesting flight if it's still there.
Yeah.
So anyway, we loaded up and got going and got airborne, and just going through the haze layer, there was nothing there. It had gone. It had disappeared. And so had the other one, which was much further south.
Yeah.
And that flight carried on and continued normally into Southampton.
Wow. Yeah,
Good day up.
That's wild. You must have been pretty nervous going up the second time, like to fly back. You must have been. I can imagine a bit all over the place.
Yeah, I've said this before. If I'd have been empty coming back from Southampton to Alderney, I would have landed on it. There's no doubt about it. I would have tried or got very, very close. Whether I'd have got radiated or not, I've no idea. But I would have got a lot closer. But you've got to think of the passengers. They're paying for their safety, and I couldn't guarantee that if we went and landed on top of it. It was huge. It was so big, but I couldn't tell whether it was a needle point, whether it was a flat plane, whether it was oval, if it was a square box with a pointed end. No shadow on the sea, so I couldn't determine the actual size of it. But it was that was an impressive day out.
There's so many questions I have about it all. It's so fascinating. So the two craft that you obviously you don't have much to compare it to much to get the relative size and everything like that. But do you, from your perspective, do you think that they seemingly were both the same shape and probably same size?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned a minute ago, they appeared and disappeared at the same second.
Yeah. So what do you make of that? That's wild.
They're working with each other. This is a sentient sentiently being operated crew
Mm.
of two different types of aircraft. Now, whether they're from off-world or whether they're military, still don't have the answer to that. I would suggest that the military would know better than to put two experimental craft in Class-A controlled airspace. I think they'd know better than that, unless they wanted someone to see it and start the program going. This sort of the theory that these things are coming, and they wanted this slightly more publicized, get it into the mainstream media all over the world, which is where it went. And also, it was one of the most studied cases, as far as I know. The only thing we didn't have was actual photographs. And ridiculously, I just got a new phone, and it took photographs. Didn't have a photograph. It didn't have a phone before that took photographs. So I forgot, basically. But yeah, that was the only thing we didn't have was photos. But yeah,
so there weren't no
definitely.
photos, okay? Because I saw a couple online, and I just wasn't sure if they were legitimate or like actually from somebody that was on the plane. I'll send them to you after, just in case it's going to be like, oh wow, that's exactly what I saw. But yeah, I definitely wasn't sure about the authenticity.
Yeah. I saw a few mock-ups, some sort of cartoon type things. And the Sun newspaper in England had this double-page spread of this massive, great thing, and a little tiny trilander next to it. It was quite fun. But yeah, they were definitely operated by. They were under sentient control, I think, and they were deliberately at 2,000 feet, both of them, to be in the top of the haze layer, so they could only be seen from above. From the side, you can't see, and from below, unless you're directly underneath, you wouldn't be able to see up through an angle towards that haze level. So I think there was some sentient control in that attitude, the actual fact that they were at that level to remain invisible. Now, there was a conversation with two people that were walking in the island of Sark, holidaymakers, and they reported it to the hotelier that they had seen one of these objects towards Alderney, which is exactly where it was. And the hotel manager called it into the local radio station, but those two people never came forward. Now, the other pilot that saw it whilst airborne, flying from Blue Islands, and this is relatively common, his company said that you mustn't report this, they'll think you're nuts. So even though it is in Class-A controlled airspace, and it must be reported, there's no argument, this is what you have to do, he didn't report it due to the fact that he would have got fired if he talked about it. Now, you're getting this all over the world, especially in O'Hare Airport, where this huge UFO just went up through the clouds.
That was a few months before as well, wasn't it? I think yours.
It was pretty close too, yeah. And so all the people on the ground were, don't talk about it. None of the other pilots, don't talk about it. You'll get fired. It was an end of career report. I didn't even think about that because this is just what you have to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, two craft. They arrived. I can find out the actual minutes and seconds. They appeared at exactly the same moment, and
they just appeared. They didn't like speed into frame. They just kind of popped in.
No, I can't say that. It was visible when I got up to altitude, so I could see it from out of the ground haze into Southampton on the way to Alderney. But on the radar, they appeared at the same second and disappeared at the same second. It was about I think it was an hour and 5 minutes they were on radar for.
Wow.
And moving away from each other at about 12 knots.
Yeah.
One heading northwest, and one heading southwest. So they're moving at a slight angle away from each other. The southernmost one not far off the coast of the northern tip of Guernsey, and the northernmost one was overhead, quite important, of the rocks at Casquet's Lighthouse. Now, one of the reports said it was a ship that was reflecting the radar from Guernsey and Jersey. There's no way a ship will be able to fly over a lighthouse. Yeah, that was one of the reports that came out. Yeah,
yeah, it'd be doing pretty well to do that. And so, from your perspective, it looked like they were hovering essentially stationary the entire time that you were seeing them, but according to the radar, they were kind of slowly trickling away from each other. These giant objects just slowly,
huge objects, absolutely. And of course, when you're flying in something that's doing 6 or 10 knots, it's impossible to see that.
Yeah, especially something of that size.
Hmm.
And so yeah, back to the size then, like how, so you're very confident that they were that kind of size, like when we're talking about a mile long.
Probably. Well, I can give you an example of that. When a little while later, another reporter whose name I can't remember now made available a trip to Jersey air traffic control, and where the main head was, there were two heads, two radar heads, scanning the same sky, and they linked together in the Jersey air traffic control,
Hmm.
and that's where the Elvira radar was stored. A very ancient system, non-compatible with Windows or any of the other platforms. But they said, yeah, come down and have a look. And we got this, replayed this screen on the main screen, replayed the tape, and it physically was a tape. You know, it wasn't a hard drive or anything like that. So there it was playing away, and when it was speeded up, you could see these two things going away from each other, and each time the radar passed through it, you got a time noted on the screen. So they took some of the times off of it because it was all conglomerated into one mass. So
Hmm.
you could see the individual times on it. And on one of the sweeps from the Jersey head, which was 20 miles away, I forget the frequency that the signal goes in and goes out and goes in. The actual radar reflections come back. But on one of the sweeps, just one of the sweeps, it hit the same object, which was the UFO closest to Casquettes, three times on one of the sweeps. And from that, he estimated that there would be, for three strikes to hit the same object and reflect back to the head, that would be at least a mile long.
Yeah.
So that was the technician's thinking. So
Wow.
from that, I mean, I was pretty sure it was massive, because you
Yeah.
cannot see something from 50 miles away. You can't see it.
Yeah.
You can't even see a ship, a
Yeah.
big tanker. You just about possibly make it out with binoculars, but something that big from 50 miles away, which I didn't realize was 50 miles. I thought it was 7 or 8 miles.
Exactly,
Size
which is
of it, I
quite
think I did.
compelling for me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I did say to the air traffic controller, asked how big is it? This was a Jersey air traffic controller. He said, how big is it? I said, it's about the size of a 737. Now, that's about, what, 150 feet long, not 6,280 feet long, which is a mile. And that's what it was. That's how big it was. And sorry, 6,080, is that nautical mile? Yeah, got that wrong. But anyway, it was big, massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them huge, both of them working with each other, and both appearing and disappearing at the same second.
Yeah. And when you look through the binoculars, you said you saw like this definite outline and everything. Like, what do you recall? Like when I say that now, do you kind of go there in your head? Are you seeing what you saw then? Do you remember it in that much detail? Was it
Do
like
you know?
metallic? Anything like that?
Yeah. Well, when I first saw it, I thought, and I remember saying to myself, thinking to myself, "That's odd."
Yeah.
And I've seen lots of weird things. Uh, Venus, I thought was an airplane coming towards us. I was going to Brussels one day, and I could see this aircraft with the landing lights coming straight towards us, and it was Venus. You know, and I've flown through a swarm of bees, and the whole aircraft was completely covered in bees.
No way.
So, and I got struck with lightning a few times. But doesn't do any. Well, it cracked the windscreen. But
Really?
I've seen quite a few, twice on the same night. That was I got struck by lightning coming out of Brussels into Birmingham. But anyway, I had to do a compass swing in Zaventem in Belgium, and then we flew back and got struck again. And it cracked the windscreen. But
That must have been
in Birmingham,
terrifying.
well, it's over. It's done. Done in a second. You don't really. But swarm of beads was quite fun because see this brown mass. I thought, what on earth is it? And it just covered the whole aircraft in bees.
Wow.
So I've seen some odd things, and
Yeah.
I've seen lots of things at night from far away, which the city looks almost the same shape as a UFO. You're just seeing it at a slant angle. You're seeing
Hmm.
a city from the side, 50, 60 miles away. And that's pretty much how it looked. But this was a brilliant white. And you could look at it, but it didn't stay in your eyes. It's a really strange thing to try and explain, but it didn't. If you look at the sun briefly, you got the shape of the sun in your eyeball for a couple of
Hmm.
minutes afterwards. You don't want to do that to anybody at home listening in. Don't look at the sun. But with this particular object, it didn't have anything like that. It just was brilliant, and you could still look at it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The most amazing thing actually I've ever seen. I think.
Really.
yeah,
And the thing that you described about, like you had the darker area and the lighter area, and you had the kind of this border thing with you said sparkling
yeah,
in
yeah,
the chapter in Leslie Kean's book UFOs. You described it as like a pulsating layer with sparkling blues, greens, and other
yeah.
colors strobing up and down every second or so. Have you
Well,
ever
yeah.
seen anything like that before or after?
No, I wondered if it was something to do with the propulsion system afterwards, but I didn't really have time to think. There's a lot goes on when you're flying. You got to
Yeah.
think where you are, where you're going, and what the conditions are, get the weather, blah blah. But I didn't. But afterwards, when I thought about it, I wondered whether it was something to do with the propulsion system.
Hmm.
There was no visible antenna. There was no visible engines. There was just a shape, 15:1 aspect ratio, in the sky with this along the side of it, about that width. If you're looking at a craft that long, and about that width was this sparkling interface between the main yellow and this dark band. And I wonder whether that was something to do with the propulsion system. I don't know. Uh, there was nothing visible that would enable it to move. There were no
Hmm.
wings. It was just there. It's like an anti-gravity machine
Yeah.
moving very gently north. But that interface was very prominent on both of them. And the
Mm.
one that I saw was still 20 miles away. You could still see the same band on that aircraft. And that was speculation at the time that it may have been some light anomaly where you get some refraction in a
Hmm.
particular type of light, lenticular clouds and all that sort of thing. But lenticular clouds don't give off a radar reflection.
Yeah.
Well, I've never
With
heard of one.
Were there any other like really interesting kind of features or elements about this? So one of them would be the fact it was so bright and brilliant, and yet it didn't hurt your eyes. One would
Yeah.
be this kind of sparkling, strobing, pulsating band. Was there anything else that kind of jumped out at you? Like, as obviously the size and the fact it just
Yeah.
sat there in the air and everything like that. But was there any other little detail that's maybe something that's been overlooked? You feel, or an important detail that's not?
I don't think so. I thought about it an awful lot and what more happened that day, and
Mm,
I think I don't think so. If it would have been fantastic if there had been a sun shining
mm,
on top of it, because then we could have made out on the sea how big it was compared to a rock or a ship or something like that. You'd have something in comparison.
yeah,
But no, there was nothing more than that.
yeah. And so we say about a mile long. What do you know what the biggest human made craft is that like the publicly known about human
Uh, well, then,
airplane or
well, I was at that time they were building the Queen Elizabeth or Queen Mary, whatever it was, the aircraft carrier. They
okay,
were
yeah,
building two, I think. Huge expense, a billion, so many hundreds of billions of pounds, and that was, I think it's 1,000 feet long, so about a sixth of a mile, and that's
mm,
enormous. And I think the biggest super tanker at that time was about 500,000 tons, and that was like 1,500 feet long, something like that, or 2,000 feet. So not even a third of a mile. I don't know of anything bigger, but certainly nothing of a mile like that's ever been built that's got airborne. We're
yeah,
talking about ships. Okay, a ship can, it doesn't need propulsion to keep it in the air, but these were big and on airborne as well.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's wild. And so just remind me of the duration. So you saw how long did you watch the objects for, and then how long after you lost contact, like after you landed, how long did they leave the
Okay,
air
well,
break out?
I saw the whole thing. It was about 13 and so odd minutes
Yeah,
on the air traffic control recordings, but I had seen it before that,
yeah,
before I called it in for about 3 or 4 minutes. But
yeah,
I'm estimating roughly my sighting would have been 17 minutes
yeah.
of the same object, and then 50% along that road was the other object as well thrown into the mix. So 17 minutes, but the actual radar. I'll have to remind myself of this, but I think it was an hour and 4 minutes
Hour. Okay,
that
okay.
they were visible to radar, and
Yeah,
then, as I say, gone
yeah.
and arrived at the same second, and then gone at the same second. So they're working together.
So again, with the radar, they just totally blipped out. They didn't like just move super fast, and it was like hard for the radar to keep up. They just, or you said it's with the like the reads, right? So it kind of does that sweep and then another sweep.
Yeah.
So
But that's quite a little bit of an interesting story with that one is the fact that when we went down to see the radar tapes, They gave me some hard copies of what they could see. I've still got the printed pieces of paper. A bit difficult to see these days because the ink's gone a bit wild. But anyway, I've still got those. And I think it was about 2008. This is maybe a year or maybe 2 years after the sighting. They replaced that radar system, the Alvera system, with a more modern synthetic type of radar, much better, if you like. And they chucked the old radar away and all the tapes. We thought,
yeah.
But one of the Gaipan investigators, a French group, went to Jersey and found the old air traffic controller, where another air traffic controller thought that the first air traffic controller had kept the tapes in his shed in the garden, and it turned out that he had. So he very kindly gave them to Gaipan, which is a French investigative group, and they've had them now for, well, must be 12 years, and they've managed to synthesize all that information onto a Windows platform, and frame by frame by frame by frame. It's taken a long time to do it, and they've come back with so much more information that actually wasn't visible on that screen in those days.
Yeah.
And they're now getting to many other objects, very tiny objects that were in the same sky at the same time, possibly interacting with these other two very large ships. Now their investigation is ongoing. I wasn't able to contact them. They wanted a Zoom call a little while ago. I won't go into that, but anyway, they have got much more information, and I think they're pretty much going to be ready to publish in the middle of 2024, with a lot of other interest. And they've managed to get altitude details from some of these objects, which are 60,000 feet. I mean, we don't have aeroplanes that can go to 60,000 feet. We did have Concorde, but not very many others. And these are tiny things that are going backwards and forwards and all over the shop. So this information, I think, is going to be coming out within the next year or two.
Yeah,
I can't be more specific than that, but they're really digging into it deep.
Yeah, well, that's good that people are digging into it. And these little objects, they think they might have been interacting with the giant objects that you saw.
There's a possibility that they were satellites acting with it,
or some kind of probe or something.
Well, but not one or two. They're looking 50 or 60 or hundreds. I haven't got the full information. Chap's English isn't very good, but I mean, I'm getting voice calls, but they're getting there, and I think it's going to be quite eye-opening when they get the full information.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I look forward to that coming out. But you didn't see anything other than the two big. No, you didn't see was that something? No, maybe not. No.
But there was cloud cover at 10,000 feet over the whole area. So, and I think, as I understand it, a lot of this stuff was going on above, much higher than that.
Yeah.
So probably in the tropopause sort of area.
Okay. So you said about 60,000, something like that, 50 odd, 60,000.
One of the objects he mentioned was at 60,000 feet. Now, how they get that information, I don't know. But he said but not just one. There was a lot.
Yeah. Maybe they've had access to different kinds of data, radar data. I don't know. Possibly, that'd be interesting to see what comes out with that. So again, it was an intimate little plane, like an 18-seater. There was 9 people, I think you said, on board, or is it 10 with you or 9 with you, or?
Do you know? I think it was 10, including myself. Like that.
Anyway, give or take a person. But 9 or 10. So it was intimate. You there's no divider between where you're sitting and where they are. So I'm again. You said that you kind of let the guy use your binoculars and you're talking, but initially you said you didn't want to draw their attention to it or kind of freak them out. So
it was flying. Whilst I was flying, that wasn't my objective. It was when I got onto the ground when I didn't want to lead anybody.
Okay.
Anything unusual? Did you see anything unusual? So that would say, what might have done. I can't report it. But if they didn't, I didn't want to push anybody in the way.
Got you. So who was the kind of the first person to bring it up when you were in the sky? Was it you that said to somebody like, "Oh, do you see this?" Or did they then bring it to you? And what was the general kind of chit chat? What was being said? What was the vibe with the passengers? Were they scared? Were they intrigued? Were they excited? Was there any?
Well, as I mentioned, the aircraft flies like that. It's a bad
Yeah,
design, so it's
yeah,
probably slow because of that. So the people below row three would be below the height of the front windscreen. They wouldn't be able to see forward.
yeah,
Um, but the vibe was from John and Kate. This is the people in row three. They were pointing out to other people behind them
yeah.
what they could see, but the people behind them couldn't see it because the airplane flies like that.
But did
So,
they not want to get up and? I would have been like trying to get up and go a bit closer to have a look.
well, you've got about 6 inches headroom in that
You're right.
aeroplane above you, so you wouldn't not going to be able to get up. I mean, there's no aisle. There's
Yeah,
just two bench seats like you get in a 2CV,
yeah,
a car. So there's no way that they could actually might be able to do that possibly. But the general vibe was what's going on in the airplane because these two people were and a fellow with the binoculars behind me.
hmm
They were all chatting about it and what the hell's that and that sort of thing. So the general vibe was that, but it was calm, it was peaceful. What are you going to do about it? Nothing.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
nothing you can do about it. Just
yeah,
avoid hitting it. That was my main concern. Don't
yeah,
hit it.
yeah, yeah. That would have, yeah.
Or what? Don't hit it with passengers on board. Like I said, I would have landed on it otherwise.
Yeah, so
You know.
you really would have wanted to go and get as close as you could otherwise, and I
Well,
think like David Fravers had that same kind of intrigue, right, with his 2004 the Nimitz encounter,
okay,
where he
right.
wanted to get as close as he could, and
Yeah, I would have
check
done.
out
Yeah,
what
but
was
well, at
going
least
on.
get above it and have a look down.
Yeah,
Have a look down on the top because I was 4,000 feet. If I could look down on the top, you could see some idea of the shape. But I don't think the company would have been terribly well impressed that 9 of its passengers got radiated to death, including the pilot. So we don't know. That didn't happen.
yeah, yeah. And are you still in touch with? You said you knew. I think Kate and John, was it Russell? You
Yeah,
said you
yeah,
kind of
they're
knew
still
them.
here. I still bump into them in the shop.
Have you kind of, I suppose, yeah, that's cool. Have you kind of shared your kind of speculations about the event? Like, I'm sure
Well,
you
we we,
have.
we, we did that on so many television programs or recorded programs
Right.
that we probably haven't. We just say hello.
Yeah.
That happened 16 years ago. That's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we moved on from that really.
Yeah. But I guess it's still a shared event that you have.
It's
Um,
strange because a lot of people have forgotten about it, and a lot of people have never heard about it because they're younger or weren't interested at the time. So it still comes out of the woodwork every now and again. It pops up, like yourself, and sometimes it's really strange actually what happened a few years ago, and it was like it was coordinated. I had
mm,
3 independent groups, one from Holland, and one from Canada, and one from USA. Well-known media institutions like Discovery, for example,
mm.
called me on the same morning, on the same day, within a period of an hour. They contacted me. Now, tell me that's not coordinated.
So I just wanted to get more in your head when you're first seeing the object and you're flying towards it. I think in a couple of interviews, I watched some of the older interviews. In one of them, they were trying to get a soundbite out of you, and they're like, "Were you scared? Come on, were you scared?" And I think you said wasn't very happy. In one of them, you said I wasn't very happy, and I was pleased to get on the ground and get a cup of tea. And I think
Exactly right.
in another one, you kind of either said you were a bit frightened or you implied it was a bit frightening or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, can you elaborate on what was going on in your head? What were your emotions doing? Because I know that I would probably my mind would be running, race loops around a racetrack, just overthinking and like because as you said, with flying, you've already got so much going on in your mind to
Yeah.
think about. And then all of this too, and you probably, the human brain is crazy. You're going to be speculating and drawing
Yeah.
hypotheses and think.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
the flying's automatic because when you've done something, it's like driving your car to work. You don't even remember the journey.
mm-hmm.
It's just automatic.
Yeah,
I've done it so many times, but there are things you have to take care of. It's business. But my main concern was what happens if it just took off and came straight towards us? Uh, did it have massive speed capability? Could it just go sideways or could just disappear up? I don't care about that. But what if it came towards us? What will I do?
mm.
Will I dive? Will I just put the nose forward down? Because that's a nasty way to go down. And it might take the wings off. So you'd probably go upside down and, fly inverted away from it if there was time. Could it do 1,000 miles a second? If so, you're dead. But it didn't. It just stayed there, happy in its whatever it was doing. I don't know what it was doing, surveilling, Not sure, but
Yeah.
it didn't move. But my main worry was that, and also on departure again, on the fourth flight of the day, going towards it and it being in, just as you go through the haze layer, there it is. What are you going to do then? So
Mm.
those are my thoughts at the time, really. But the flying is just kind of automatic. You just get on with that.
Yeah, yeah. But you were having thoughts of, taking, like, what if I need to take evasive action? And
Exactly. Yeah. Of
where
course.
will I go?
Absolutely.
What would I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hadn't really even thought about it like that, but now you
Yeah.
say it, I'm like, yeah, that's, of course, it's
Yeah.
totally obvious. That would be what you'd think as the pilot in charge of the plane with the, these people's lives on board.
Well, I've flown many maneuverable aeroplanes, and this particular airliner, three engines, three piston engines, very slow, very heavy, is not very maneuverable unless it's
Mm,
empty. So,
mm.
yeah, we would have to think ahead. If it did start coming even gently towards you at 100 knots or something, you're going to have to make a decision to turn left and go downhill fast to
Yeah,
get underneath it, because we were at the same level for a time.
yeah.
Anyway, like that, really.
That would have been a whole totally different encounter if it had come towards you and you'd had to take evasive action. That would have been something. How many witnesses came forward overall? Do you have a number off the top of your head? Because I know it was you, the other pilot, there was at least one radar operator, there was the two passengers, the person that saw it from a hotel. Is it 6 or is there more?
That's it. That's the lot. Yeah.
Okay.
And unfortunately, no photographic evidence, unfortunately. But the radar is, in my humble opinion, pretty conclusive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also the sighting from the other captain.
Yeah. So yeah, you have the radar and obviously which tracked them for longer than you were able to keep an eye on them. That you have all these various different witnesses that just coming from different angles, from different backgrounds, different levels of expertise of looking at something in the sky. Yeah, it's really fascinating. So it must be one of the most kind of corroborated and evidential UFO encounters on record, I suppose.
I think it was because I had contacts from all over the world to do a survey of the whole flight, an audit effectively.
Yeah.
And one particular study group in Sheffield Hallam University stood out. And I said, yeah, okay, I'm happy to work with you. And they did massive calculations, reflections from lakes in France, all manner of different types of weather, refraction from the sun, reflection off the sea from the sun, but it wasn't any sun. All different sorts of studies, 150 odd pages, and the conclusion was we don't know what it was. That was a conclusion. But the doctor involved did speculate quite firmly that he thought the radar traces were reflections from the size of ships, but there were no ships in that area at the time. And also, as mentioned previously, the one closest to me was overhead of Casquet's Lighthouse on a big rock when I last saw it.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm no expert, but I think as you're traveling forwards and as you're descending and everything like that, like if it was a reflection, it's going to, the vantage point is going to change. And so that reflection is going to change. And at some point it's going to be like, oh yeah, it was a ship.
yeah.
You're going to have that moment of realization. Or even when you get below the haze layer and you're like, oh, that ship's right where I was. Okay.
That ship is directly overhead of the lighthouse. That's what it was.
Yeah.
There's no way.
It was crashed. It was already hit the rocks of the lighthouse.
Exactly.
So when you're looking at this, I'm thinking mostly about the first object, but it could apply to either. When you're kind of having that extended 10 to 15, 17-minute period where you're looking at it, did you have any sense that it was, that it attempted to interact, or that it knew you were there, or was there was nothing that it did that gave you that impression or anything like that?
It would appear that my little fly of a Trilander, Britain Norman Trilander, didn't have any effect on it whatsoever. I don't think it was terribly interested in us.
It wasn't too worried about avoiding you.
No, I was terribly interested in it, but not the other way around.
Yeah. I suppose the only thing that could sense that, like, not necessarily that it knew you were there, but that it was aware that there were people around, is, like you said earlier, staying in the haze layer to kind of reduce visibility. So,
which also raises a speculation: if it stayed in the haze layer to reduce visibility, why would it be in Class-A controlled airspace?
Yeah,
it just doesn't make any sense.
If only we knew. So yeah, so you get off the flight, you report it almost instantly. You suggest to the passengers if they saw something, they should report it. What was the process of reporting it like? Did people take you seriously from the off?
In those days,
Yeah,
it was a report form, and
yeah.
I drew a little picture on the bottom of the report form, which has all been published, and that was sent off to Jersey Air Traffic
Have you got the copy of
Control.
your picture and stuff?
Yeah, I got all that.
If you can send it to
Um,
me, that'd be great.
I'll get you. Yeah, I'll send you a scan. I'll send you a scan of everything I've got,
That'd be
and
amazing. Thank you.
that went off to the Ministry of Defence, and they're not interested.
Yeah.
This is not a threat to UK airspace.
So that was
The
the
French,
official line on this.
yeah, and the French military. This is not a threat to French airspace. So the thing was, I don't know if you know this, at that time when it was Class A, the airspace above 19,500 feet belonged to the French after
Right.
9:30 at night and before 6 in the morning. So the whole thing was French.
Yeah.
Okay, and they weren't interested either. So yeah, there's the thing I've said many times before. They know about this phenomena that's going on and ignore it. They know about this phenomena and they can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
They know about this phenomena and they're working with it. Now, one of those three is correct. I haven't yet worked out which one. I'm suspecting it's number three.
Mm. Yeah, that's obviously the hardest to wrap our minds around.
Yeah, they're working with it.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any kind of speculation in what sense that would be, or is that it's already kind of, I guess?
Well, okay. So since the sighting, I got invited to go on these American speaking tours and make a lot of money and all that sort of thing. I said no, because it just demeans the whole sighting. It
Yeah.
demeans the whole. It takes the value away by earning money off of it. People can say, you're lying because
Mm.
you're earning money, which is fair comment. So I didn't want to do that. But I did go to Washington in 2007 to speak with
Mm.
James Fox. He did a program, did a speech at the press club in Washington, and that was valid. But from that meeting, I met so many other people that put me on different paths in all different directions, not only in the UFO world, but banking, medical, money, everything you can think of. That started from that meeting in, I think it was October or November of 2007 in Washington, D.C. Wonderful people, great place to visit. I don't want to go there today. I hear it's slightly dangerous today. But that's where the rest of the information that I study today, especially in the banking industry, the revaluation of the currency and all that, that's where it all came from.
Right.
But to sit down and have a chat with abductees, to talk to them firsthand, to talk to a lot of other people that have had sightings. I mean, one particular Air Force pilot from Chile, he actually took shots. He fired his 30mm cannon at the UFO in
Yeah.
Chile, and he was told to go and shoot it down, and he did, and he shot at it. There was holes in the desert where he missed it, but some of the shells hit it, and it wasn't damaged. And then, because he'd used a lot of afterburn or reheat, he lost a lot of fuel, and had to go back to land in Chile, and he had dead stick. He had no fuel left. It was just literally on gliding down, and this object that he shot at, this chromium sphere, was on his right wingtip, about 20 feet off the wingtip.
Yeah.
And it went down with him, and he landed, parachute out, stopped. The sphere was still on his wingtip, and then just disappeared over to the top of the mountains again.
Yeah.
So, and stayed there for days. This is
wild.
page 7 stuff in South America. When it happens here, it's big news. But I met people like that, and other people that had all of their, and a chap flying a Phantom in Iran had Iran, not Iraq. Yeah,
Must
Iran.
be Parviz Jafari, this one, right?
That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
That's the fella. And all of his rocket system, SAM missile system went dead. And then we hear about, I can't remember the state it was in, that disabled all of the nuclear missiles in a complete area. You've heard of that. I can't remember. You've got more information out than I have.
Is it Robert Salas, maybe that one?
I don't remember, but all the missile silos, I think it's in Nevada or somewhere like that, they all turned off
Hmm.
with this craft hanging
Yeah.
over the top of this area. It's about 20 square miles of silos.
Malmstrom Air Force Base,
I
is
think
it that
that
one?
sounds more like it. So these things are occurring now. The great
Yeah.
news is today everyone's got a mobile phone. Even I had one back in the day, but I forgot. Stupid. But everyone's got a phone now. You're finding so much more information about what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Um, whether that's a good thing or bad thing or deliberate, I don't know. To
Yeah.
keep the news narrative away from what's actually going on.
Yeah. It's hard to know these days, isn't it? What's
Well, there's
the
information,
motivations and
disinformation,
everything.
misinformation, and it's all
Yeah.
there for military purpose, I believe.
Yeah, and of course, one person's misinformation is another person's verified fact,
Yeah,
and so everything's all just a bit more messy.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's so cool that you got to meet all of those guys, and yeah, they have some really incredible cases as well, like
yeah.
which are all or most of them are covered in Leslie's book,
Yeah, that's
UFOs.
right. Yeah, most of them are. Yeah, yeah, it's a
It's
great author.
pilots, generals, and government officials go on the
That's
record.
it.
I think it's
That's it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So just to go back to your report again. So you reported it, and basically it went nowhere. You never heard anything back other than no threat.
The only
No
thing that
threat.
came back was this is no threat to the UK or French airspace. That's all we got,
Yeah.
and nothing further from that. This is usual story.
Yeah.
However, a little while later, I'm sitting in a friend's house in Alderney, and she smokes, gone outside for a cigarette, and she said, "Ray, come and have a look at this." And I said, "All right, what is it?" So it, and I looked up, and there was this big old piece of kit just hanging in the sky, dark. It was a dark night, moonlit, starry night, moonlit night. And I've never told her about this either, actually. And she'd be quite surprised to hear that I have. And she said, "Look at that." So, okay, yeah, it's pretty unusual. It's just standing there like a big waste paper basket in the sky, made out of metal. Just kind of all angular shapes on it. And then it just went. It just disappeared to the northwest of where we were sitting. I
Wow.
was standing out in her garden, just disappeared like that. And
Yeah.
about 5 seconds later, maybe 10 seconds later, two fast jets, which never appear in Alderney at very low level. This is two fast jets came after it.
Really.
It seemed to me like they were. I don't know. They weren't. It didn't look like. They appeared French. Does that
Yeah.
sound ridiculous? They appeared, but I couldn't see them.
Not coming from a pilot. It sounds more logical than if I said it. They seemed French.
Yeah, but they were fast, but they weren't supersonic. But they were 600 plus knots, I would say, because
Yeah.
the time it took to hear them, and they were gone.
Yeah.
They were fast, but they weren't supersonic, and they came directly overhead, directly where this thing was up in the sky above us.
Wow.
And that was maybe 4 years ago, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
2018, 19. Didn't write it down, but yeah, it's still going on, and people are still having sightings here. Generally speaking, whenever they bump into me in the pub or whatever, they come and say, "I saw something really weird over top of Torgey Fort the other day." I said, "What did you see?" "Well, it's like a big what do they call it? A big wood burning stove
Mm.
hanging over the fort." So how big was
Weird.
it? Probably 20 feet, and then it just disappeared. Now, a good friend of mine, and I won't mention his name because he probably wouldn't appreciate it. We flew together here for about 3 or 4 years before he retired, and he retired back in I think 2005 at the age of 60.
Mm-hmm.
Very well-known Royal Air Force pilot and Buccaneer pilot, fast jet, and then came back into civilian flying. He was flying from Jersey to Guernsey at 2,000 feet, and he's a very quiet man. He's not public. He keeps himself to himself. He just sidled up to me one day and said, "I saw something the other day, which was quite weird." I said, "What was that?" He said, "Well, I was at 2,000 feet coming from Jersey to Guernsey, and I flew past a wood burning stove, hovering, stationary. And that was it." And he just walked away. So, and this is a man this is not a sort of fellow that make up stuff.
Yeah.
He's very, very serious, very collected. This is not the sort of a chap that would raise a conspiracy theory. He just said, "I flew past a wood burning stove at 2,000 feet." And then off he went. So, it still goes on, and it's
Yeah,
happened. And I think I would suggest that 95% of all sightings are never reported
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
throughout the world.
it sounds about right, to be honest. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's so many reasons against reporting it. Like, not that I agree with them, but there's so many apparent reasons that make sense as to why people might be less likely to report things.
yeah.
Yeah, and even just the fact that even if there's no stigma, no taboo, no backlash from your job, like sometimes it's just people don't have the time or the hassle or the headspace, or it just can't
I
be
think they're
bothered.
scared. I
Yeah,
mostly think that the air crew especially, and ground crew are scared of
yeah,
losing their jobs.
yeah. I
Like
think the
once again,
stigmas.
Like
Yeah,
O'Hare all over again.
yeah, yeah. The
That's the
stigma
main
is
thing.
the biggest issue. I mean, you obviously you must have been one of the first to come forward and make a report and go public while still being like actively flying with your company and
I
everything.
did go to the company and say, "What do you think?" In fact, then I got a phone call back from the managing director and said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, I think I saw something." He
Yeah,
said, "Well, go for it," because the publicity is worth
yeah,
millions to the
yeah,
airline.
exactly. Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I don't really understand why people want to keep this stuff under wraps. It's great publicity for the firm,
mm.
and it worked out pretty well. I think it must well, the full page spread in the middle of the Sun newspaper. That's £1 million in itself. You know, so good for the company.
Yeah. It is strange why a lot of it is kept so under wraps and things like that. I suppose it's just largely related to the same taboo and stigma. It's just it's so ingrained and so
It's the same as a
systemic.
helicopter pilot that saw the other UFO that I saw over Brighton
Hmm.
in Sussex. He was retiring the following day, so put it
Yeah,
out there.
yeah,
If he hadn't have
yeah,
been retiring the following day, I guarantee you it would never have got published.
yeah. Lucky timing.
Yeah.
Um, what were your like immediate thoughts? So within the first say 24, 48 hours, it's all fresh. I'm guessing it
Yeah.
was still something that when you got home and you're sitting down with your cup of tea, I'm guessing that was the first thing in your mind. You're like, so what did I see? So
Yeah.
your immediate speculations and thoughts, and then how does that contrast or compare with your speculations and thoughts now, 16 years later, after researching this phenomenon and everything
Yeah.
like that?
Well, it stayed within the aviation community for what 3 or 4 days. Nothing was heard about it. Maybe a week. There's a few funny remarks and that, but there were no. Quite surprisingly, nobody was disparaging, especially in
Mm-hmm.
the. There were a few jokes, and the 5 notes that are on Close Encounters of the Third Kind were whistled at me occasionally walking down the street. But there was no real backlash. And then a BBC reporter, funnily enough, that lives in Alderney, got hold of it, and then it just went mad from that. Invited to do this, that, and the other. Go to London, and I did do that actually. On some talk show, Judy, something and Judy,
Oh yeah, Richard and Judy.
Richard
Yeah,
and Judy. Yeah, that was fun. That was fun actually. It
yeah.
was a fun day up. I met the most miserable actor in the world there, but he's sadly passed away now, so I won't mention I won't mention his name or how short he was.
Right.
But anyway, it was good fun. We had a laugh about it, and I think actually it may have encouraged other people to come forward with their
Yeah.
sightings. So I heard from them afterwards that they had a lot more. A lot of people telephoned in and wrote in and said, I had the same sort of experience.
Yeah.
And
And
also,
sorry.
sorry, a lady here in Alderney that I used to work with Irene, she came forward to me and said, I saw exactly the same shaped thing out of my top bedroom window about a month ago. And that was
Yeah.
about, I don't know, a year after the event. So
Yeah.
it did bring people out of their carapace, out of their shells.
Yeah. Yeah. And they didn't make you feel ridiculed or like judged or, anything
No,
like that on the Richard and Judy. Because a lot of the
no,
time on kind of, I'm not going to say on Richard and Judy, I have no idea, but on like these kind of, daytime TV shows and things like that, or even just popular mainstream kind of shows, it will normally be if they get somebody on to talk about this kind of thing, it'll be like, oh, it's somebody that says their wife was abducted and replaced with
yeah,
a Mars bar or something, or aliens like took my wife, and I know this because they
yeah,
left a half-eaten bag of crisps on the floor, these kind of ridiculous things, and so it's just so easy to continue that stigma. But they treated you with respect, they took you
yeah. Well,
seriously.
yes, they did. It's Channel 4, I think. on the same day, I did an interview with CNN. It's the one that this Glenn. I can't remember his name now. He's still going today, but the CNN fired him actually for telling the truth about something. I can't remember his surname now, but I had it had a live audience in the USA. I forget where they were. I think it's in their headquarters in California, and live audience in there, and just I couldn't see them. All I had was a little camera in front of me, and but I could hear from the laughter that was going on in the background. And I heard afterwards they were putting little UFOs in the picture, and they were flying and landing on my head and going through my ear and out the other side.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was still going on then. That was America. However, that particular chap whose surname I can't remember has now flipped. He's gone the other way. He's realised that CNN was just a propaganda, and still is a propaganda news outlet. I think got fired, but he was not there anymore. But now he's changed his tune to exactly the opposite of what it was, and he's a bit of a truth teller today. And I just wish I could remember his surname.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd never seen that program, but I could note that from the laughter coming out from behind that they were taking the Michael, as we say in England.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, that's the perfect epitome, isn't it, of the stigma and the taboo and how it's created and how it's sustained, and how basically to convince people to not come forward and share their stories and everything like that. Yeah, it's
that's changed.
Infuriating.
I'm pretty sure now they want people to come forward because they want to maintain this be frightened, be scared narrative.
Yeah, I think it's changing. I don't know exactly where we are. I still think we're in a confusing time where some sections seem to, be encouraging it. And there's obviously still, some, like I say, some channels and news sources where I'm like, do they not realize who David Grush is and what he came forward and said? And how are they, how are they not even mentioning this at the end of the headlines? When they do the news articles about this squirrel can water ski, and then they're not even telling us about David Grush. They're telling us about water skiing squirrel, but not David Grush. It's mind-blowing stuff.
Well, at least the BBC has had to apologise recently about its reporting in Gaza. So I think that because now X, formerly Twitter, is able to fight back with Elon Musk actually enabling narrative to come out against what's being said. They're having to retract an awful lot of stories, and the propaganda is hopefully starting to disappear. It'll never disappear until they disappear.
Yeah, we're in an interesting time. We're going to see some interesting things in the sense of all this, like the control of information and everything.
There's one other interesting thing that might be of interest to your audience. Now, this is a first-hand observation from a good friend of mine. Who actually flew for the same company. I won't mention his name. He was doing exactly the same route as I was doing from Alderney to Southampton to Alderney. And he noted that on the way back, because you're over the English Channel for most of the time, the English Channel was pretty rough, very rough. But there was an area ahead of him, slightly to his left, which was calm, a flat area of sea which was very calm, and the rest of the sea all around it was lapping over something that was just below the surface of the water. He could see the sort of the waves coming over the top, then going calm on top. I said, how big was it? He said, well, it took me a minute to fly over it. Now, 120 knots is a very slow aeroplane. That's a mile, okay? It took me 30 seconds to fly over it. It was a mile long.
Right. So
that's weird and kind of didn't resonate with me at all at the time. And then I thought about a story that had happened, well, not a story, a fact, that a submarine had got lost here called the HMS Affray in 1953 and lost with all hands. Now, they could hear tapping on the hull from ships that went searching for it for 3 days. So there were still people alive on it. But what happened, I believe it was 1976, a diver found the wreck, divers, and went down and took photographs of the wreck. It's a war grave, obviously, so I didn't want to enter. But what had happened is that the snorkel, which the when the submarine is submerged, it breathes through a snorkel to enable the diesel engines to power it underwater, just under the water. And this conning tower top was damaged, and all of the snorkel and associated equipment on top of the conning tower was smashed, was broken off, was bent backwards. It looked like it had hit something. Now, when they sent all these ships out to surveil, to try and find the HMS Ray under the water, whilst the tapping on a hull was still going on, they found a massive, this is on the sonar, massive object on the sea floor. It was huge. They don't say how big it was when you read the report, but it was very, very large. But that can't be a submarine that we're looking for. We'll go and look at that another day. They recorded where it was, and they didn't find a submarine for another 25 years at least, I think it was. Then they went back to look for this other large object a little while later, and it had gone. It wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
Now, portal, is it something there that would have been, maybe they made a mistake? I don't think so. They went up and down it 6 or 7 times with sonar to determine how big this thing was. It's bigger than any ship that's ever been made, today included. Was that the thing that my buddy, my fellow pilot, saw just below the surface when the waves weren't breaking over it and it was breaking all the way around it? Just a bit of historic speculation out there, but it's an interesting story that's never been told before. I've never told anyone that, and he hasn't.
Well, thank you for sharing it. Yeah. That's fascinating.
This would have been in a particular area known as Herd's Deep.
Okay.
Herd's Deep is where a lot of ammunition was buried. A lot of nuclear waste was buried in steel drums. It's a very deep area of the sea, just north of Alderney by about 8 miles, and that is pretty much what he told me where he saw it. So whether that is interactive, I don't know. I'm not sure, but anyway, I thought you'd like to know that one.
Do you know when it was? What year it was? You might have said.
It would have been. It was around about 2010.
Okay.
About that period.
I mean, it's fascinating that there's like nuclear waste around there, and things like that. It's fascinating the way this thing was under the water. Could have been a craft, could have been a giant craft that moved away, could have been something else. It also reminds me a little bit of the incident with David Fravor at the Nimitz, where he said he saw this tic-tac kind of doing ping-pong moves above the water, and under the water he saw this, this large shape that I think he compared to a 737 kind of size, but I don't think he was definitive. Sounds like a different size to this one, but the same kind of idea of just below the surface. I think with his, the water was breaking on top. It could have been a slightly different depth or whatever, but it was something that his eyes were drawn to, and he's like, what's that under the surface there? But it's quite increasingly common to hear about these things in the context of being underwater and around water and being able to get in and out of water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, there was another sighting in Guernsey. Nothing to do with me. I just read about it, where a lady in the northeast side, unusually northeast side of Guernsey, saw this craft about 30 feet above the water, stationary, no noise, no helicopter, drop a tube down into the water. And after about a minute, the tube went back up and it disappeared off quickly. Really? So maybe it was refueling. I don't know. I've got a clue. But that was another thing. But most of the sightings in the Channel Islands, generally speaking, happen to the northwest of the islands. There's a kind of a line there. There's a lady that I used to stay when I first went down was based in Guernsey. In the hotel I stayed at, there was a lady there that she worked behind the bar, got chatting. She was driving home after the bar work one night about 12 o'clock along the west coast of Guernsey. There's a long coast road there. And she saw this thing in the sky, which she described as a block of flats, to the degree where she was looking at it, she crashed into the sea wall and punctured her front tire. And she got out, and this chap pulled up behind her and said, everything all right? She said, well, I've just punctured my car, I just hit the wall, but look at that. And he saw it as well. But she never reported it, and I think the first person she spoke to was me, because of the sighting. So that's the people come out of the woodwork too. I had so many people in Guernsey just come up to you in the bar or in a restaurant, or there's, what you saw, I saw this or that or the other. And like I say, probably 98% are never reported
Yeah.
of sightings.
Do you think it's a bit of a hotspot there, Guernsey, the
Yeah,
Channel Islands? Yeah.
for sure, absolutely for sure. Yeah, yeah. I must have spoken to, I don't know, since then to today, people, not today, but this year, I must have spoken to 400 or 500 people, or they've come to me and had a chat. Friends, their relatives. My relatives saw this, that, and the other. We were in the Boy Scouts and this happened, and all that sort of thing. Historically, so it goes back 50, 60, 70 years. It's not a new thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe longer.
Yeah.
In terms of the skeptical attempts to try to explain and debunk and, like demystify this encounter, have you, like, what was the best skeptical attempt to explain it, and what are your kind of responses to the skeptical attempts? I've from my brief looking, like, they attempt saying like clouds, like lenticular clouds of the sun, fishing boats, earthquake lights, that kind of thing. Did any of it seem like, that one's a decent effort?
Interesting. Yeah, good effort. You're right. There's a couple. One was earthquake lights. The same day. I think we had an earthquake in Dover the same day or day after.
Right.
But they don't appear over the sea, earthquake lights. It's only over land.
Right.
Apparently, I've never seen them. But a local astronomer chap here maintained very strongly that it was a moon dog, which is refracted light outside of the moon or the sun.
Yeah.
Sun dog, they got different types of. It all depends on the type of cloud. I had a chat with him, and I convinced him otherwise.
Yeah. Were there any others that you felt like, this is interesting? Because I'm obviously, every time somebody comes up with one of these, an attempt to explain it, I'm sure you kind of put yourself in that, and I'm like, okay, so could it be like,
someone told me something that was in Private Eye, the satirical newspaper about it. But to be honest with you, it's just all over the place, so I just ignored it. It was on the net, it was on the internet. Still early-ish days of the internet. It was all over the place on that. But they soon forget. They move on. They move on to the next target.
Yeah. As you said, you've stated clearly what you've seen, and it's good to know that Japan or Gipan, I never know how to pronounce them, are looking into it.
It's Gaipan, Gaipan, I think it is.
Depends which accent we go with. Look, Ray, I really appreciate your time and everything today. Looking forward to talking to you again, and I wish you all my best.
Thanks very much.
Thank you to Ray Bowyer for talking with me. Thank you to our patrons for supporting us, and thank you for listening. Please see the description for relevant links. If you want to continue unraveling the universe with us, then please subscribe. And if you want to give us even more support, then please consider a small monthly contribution via Patreon. Thank you.